This is the Shabbos at the beginning of the month of Kislev. And Kislev in general is known to be a Chassidish month, because during the month of Kislev we have many Chassidish Yomim Tovim. And especially this year, that this year in addition we also have the fact that it is a Shana Tmima, it is a whole and complete year because it is a leap year. So in comparison to a regular year, this year is a complete year because it has an additional month. And also taking into consideration that this year comes in continuation to the previous year, the last year, which was the year of Shnas Tismach and Tesamach. So Mamela, when we're entering this month, which is such a special month, then towards the end of the month we have the Yontif of Chanukah. Even though Chanukah comes at the end of the month, we know the expression No'ut Tchilosam B'Soifon V'Soifon B'Tchilosam, which means that the end and the beginning have a relation one to another. So Chanukah coming at the end of the month is still related to an Indian that has a Shaykhas at the beginning of the month where we are right now. And we are now entered this special month. So the Rebbe says that what is really negeya most is Hamaisa Hu Ha'ika. Maisa, deed, action, this is what counts and supersedes everything. Mamela, we have to utilize this month, which is a very special month as far as Hamaisa Hu Ha'ika. Actually, these subjects, which we just mentioned, the Rebbe has spoken Wednesday night, the night of Rosh Chodesh. He spoke after Ma'ariv. And when the Rebbe spoke Wednesday night, he also touched these issues that we have entered the month of Kislev, which Kislev, the Rebbe used the expression, ask any child that's being raised in the Chassidish home, the child will tell you when he knows that Kislev is a Chassidish month, it's a special month. And Wednesday night the Rebbe brought out also the fact that this year is a Shana Tmima, but he also added on that this year we are also celebrating 200 years from the birth of the Tzemach Tzedek. And regarding what the Tzemach Tzedek has introduced in Torah, it's also an inyan of Tmimois, completeness. What's the Taij? We know that there's Nigla and there's Pnimius. In fact, the Alter Rebbe, we know, was named Shnei Oyer, a double illumination, double light, because the Alter Rebbe excelled in Nigla and Chassidus. However, Nigla remained as separate, and Chassidus remained separate. What was the Tzemach Tzedek's accomplishment? The Tzemach Tzedek's Mamorim, which are Chassidus, Maimers Chassidus. In the Mamorim of the Tzemach Tzedek we find how he blends in and he explains, in Yonim, explains the Inyan Alpi Nigla, and then later would explain the same Inyan as it is Alpi Chassidus. So the Tzemach Tzedek was really the one that introduced the concept of Tmimus, whole and complete as far as Torah. And the Rebbe concluded the Sikha Wednesday night asking that, being that we're entering this Chassidish month, this special month, it would be advisable that everyone should increase during the month in learning Chassidus. When the Rebbe spoke about it Wednesday night, he added on that beginning from the Chassidus of the Baal Shem Tov, and we have from the Baal Shem Tov, there's the Sefer Tzavos HaRivosh, which is the will of the Baal Shem Tov. And the Tzavos HaRivosh begins with an Inyan also that has a Shaykhus to Tmimus. There he explains how we have to serve the Rebishter B'Tmimus, whole and complete, to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And the Rebbe said also to learn Torah from the Maggid and from the Alter Rebbe, and also those that want from the rest of the Rebbeim. Today, as we will hear later on in the Farbrengen, towards the end, in fact, the Rebbe referred to this Hayroya which he has spoken in the middle of the week, and also reminded us again that during the month of Kislev it's appropriate for everyone to make an increase in the learning of Chassidus. Getting back to what the Rebbe spoke this afternoon, darf dich leben mit der Zeit, the famous expression of the Alter Rebbe, to live with the time, which means Parshas HaShavua, and this week's Parsha is Parshas Toldos. The Seder begins, Eile Toldos Yitzchak. What's the Pshat Toldos? Rabbi says this nemes relates to each and every neshama. Every neshama, when the neshama comes down into this world, the goal of the neshama is to accomplish toldos, fruits, to be fruit bearing. Because otherwise, if the neshama will come down into this world and the neshama will not accomplish anything, then there's a famous expression in Gemara, Zovin v'zovin, tagre ikre. If a person buys and sells for the same price, could we call such a person a merchant? He's not a merchant. When you buy for one price and you sell for more, that is when you're a merchant. So Mamela, the same thing with the neshama coming down into this world. When the neshama comes down, and through Yeridas HaNeshama, it achieves Toldos, it becomes fruit bearing. That is when the Yeridas HaNeshama is successful. Talking on Parshas HaShavua, Rabbi says now is also the time to mention an Indian that has a shaykhus to Pirush Rashi in this week's Seder. Rashi begins Eila Toldos, and Rashi goes on Yaakov ve'Esav hamurim beparsha. What's discussed here? The Toldos of Yaakov. In other words, Seder begins Eila Toldos Yitzchak. So Rashi explains what's the taich, the Toldos Yitzchak. What are the children of Yitzchak? Rashi adds on, Yaakov ve'Esav ha'amurim beparsha. Yaakov and Esav that are discussed in this week's Seder. Who was born first? Esav was really born first. So Rashi is relating to the parsha, the way they are the ha'amurim beparsha, the way they are discussed in the parsha, the way they are discussed in the parsha. Esav is mentioned first, and then Yaakov is mentioned. First Esav was born, and then Yaakov was born. Should we say that Rashi is relying on what Rashi says weiter? Rashi gives a mushal of something that goes into a little pipe, and whatever goes in first really comes out last, and that is why Rashi is referring to Yaakov first and to Esav last, Esav second. Then Rashi should have at least alluded to it. Should have explained to us why he's mentioning Yaakov first on this smach, relying on that. But Rashi does not allude to that in any way. So the question is back. It's not Yaakov ve'Esav ha'amurim beparsha, the way it's amurim beparsha, the way they were born. It's Esav ve'Yaakov ha'amurim beparsha. That's one thing that requires understanding. Then if we go weiter in the Seder, Rashi explains Avram hoiled es Yitzchak. Rashi gives us Eila Toldos Yitzchak ben Avram hoiled es Yitzchak. Rashi explains at length that being they were Letzonei Hadoyer, there were people that were making Letzones, they didn't believe that the Rebbe should perform such a miracle, that Avram and Sarah at such an old age were able to have a child. So they were saying, Ma'avimelech nesabra Sarah, that Sarah became pregnant from Avimelech. What did the Rebbe do? The Rebbe made that Yitzchak should look very similar to Avram. So cluster panav shel Yitzchak, the image of Yitzchak, the face of Yitzchak should look very similar to the face of Avram. And maybe everybody will know that Yitzchak is the son of Avram. Avram hoiled es Yitzchak. That's where the pasuk repeats. Avram hoiled es Yitzchak. And this is what Rashi tells us here at Parshas Toldos. Rabbi says this inyan, you know where Rashi should have told us that 2 Seders ago, when we begin learning about the birth of Yitzchak, and then there are those that suspected there was the Letzonei Hadoyer that said that was Mavimelech Nesabra Sarah. So there Rashi should have found it appropriate to bring in this inyan and relate this inyan to us. But Rashi didn't do that. Furthermore, there is a pasuk, Hinika bonim Sarah, it's mentioned how Sarah was nursing her infant. So there Rashi tells us that everybody brought their infants to the party which they made for Yitzchak, and Rebbe made, it was in such a way everybody brought along their infants, and Sarah was nursing all of them, to show that Sarah was still, at an age, was still capable of having a child. So in Zemedach that Rashi does explain such type of an inyan. Where does Rashi explain it? Where the Torah is discussing the birth of Yitzchak.
Here we're not talking about the birth of Yitzchak. This Inyan has a shaykhs 2 sedras ago. Here we're talking about Yitzchak already. Toldos Yitzchak. Yitzchak already is his children, Yankov and Esav. Amurim beparsha. Here Rashi comes in with a whole explanation and tells us that what you should know, that why did Yitzchak look similar to Avraham? Because there were some people that suspected that really Yitzchak was not the child of Avraham. This Inyan has no shaykhs here. This is an Inyan which we should have been told about as soon as we learn about the birth of Son. I've also mentioned, by us we have these 2 Rashis which we just discussed. These are 2 separate Rashis. First we have the Rashi that begins Ve'ela Toldos Yitzchak and tells us Yaakov Esav Hamurim Beparsha. Then comes the next Perush of Avram Hoiledes Yitzchak, which contains what we just discussed. Rabbi says, to bring to our attention that in the first print of Rashi, this whole Perush is really in one piece, in one Inyan. By us, it's divided into two separate captions. In the first print of Rashi, it comes all in one hemshech. But regardless, the Rebbe raised these questions, and he left them unanswered. The Rebbe continued also to say that, getting back to Kislev, how Kislev is the special month, and Kislev has the Chassidish Yom Tovim. Especially, we're approaching the Chassidish Yontif of Tes Kislev. Tes Kislev is the birthday and the Yom HaHilula, and the day that it passed away, of the Mittel Rebbe. The Gemara says, Tzadikim HaKadosh Baruch Hu Mimalei Shnoiseyem Miyoim Liyoim. We find the same by Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu was born on Zayin Oda, and he passed away on Zayin Oda. So Chazal apply here this concept that Tzadikim HaKadosh Baruch Hu sets up their life miyoim liyoim, exactly from their day of birth, and the day of Ptira is on the same day. Rabbi says, but L'Poyel, L'Maisa, we don't see it by Tzadikim, B'Golui. Obvious, it's not seen by Tzadikim. We find it by Moshe Rabbeinu, and we find it by the Mittel Rebbe. But it's not something which we should see by other Tzadikim, even by the remainder of the Rabbeim, the Chabad Rabbeim. We also don't find such an Indian that their birthday and the Yom HaHilula should be on the same day. But by the Mittel Rebbe we do find it. Rabbi says it's appropriate that to arrange for Farbrengens on that day, for Chassidische Farbrengens on that day, the Farbrengen should be with a shturim, as it's appropriate for such a day, and to prepare properly and accordingly, and proper preparation, the proper effort should go in before, and Mela the Farbrengens will be in a most successful way. Getting back to the Heroah, which we can derive from this week's Sedre, here the Sedre talks about the Toldos of Yitzchak. And the Rebbe says the Heroah has to be such, which has nothing to do with the fact that we're reading Parshas Toldos in the month of Kislev, when Kislev is a Chassidish Yontif. Because the Inyan of reading the Sedre, this dates back to the times of Moshe Rabbeinu, before Kislev became a Chassidish month. And we know that there were 2 systems how to read the Torah. There was one system that we would read the Torah and complete the Torah once in every year. The Rambam tells us about another system that would read and complete the Torah once in 3 years. But nonetheless, what has been accepted, the following pattern which has been accepted, is that we read the Torah and it comes on Simchas Torah, we finish the Torah. In fact, the Rebbe mentions, the Zohar tells us that we celebrate Simchas Torah in an extremely freiliche way, an extremely festive way, because that is the day when the Torah is completed. That the whole Inyan of Kriyas HaTorah is something which dates back to Moshe Rabbeinu. So we're looking for a Heroah which we can derive from Parshas Toldos. It has to be something which has no shaykhs to the fact that we're reading Toldos in the Chassidish month, in the month of Kislev. It has to be something which a Heroah mitzat Parshas Toldos itself. And regarding the life of Yitzchak, which this is really what's discussed in Parshas Toldos, comes out that Yitzchak was the one amongst the others that lived the most. Avram lived for 175 years. Yaakov lived 147 years. And Yitzchak lived 180 years. And here the Medrash applies the expression to it, Yimei Tmimim. He lived a life of Tmimus, again, whole and complete, in comparison to the other others. True Take, Lagabe Avram Avinu, we find that why did he pass away at the age of 175 and not later? That was because at that time Esav was Yotza L'Tarbus Ra. That is when Esav went out in a bad way, and the Rebbe did not want that Avram should have a seva, his elder years should be tied in with Agmas Nefesh. So that was Taka the reason for it. But the fact was that Avram Taka did not live more than 175. And again, Yaakov, it's also brought reasons. Why? Because Yaakov was not nizar properly in the covet of his father. Yaakov was away for many years and did not notify Yitzchak where he was. So for this reason it's brought to Chazal, Yaakov did not live as long as Yitzchak. But whatever the reason is, it still comes out to be that Yitzchak was the one that lived 180 years. As far as each and every Yid has a shaykhis to every one of the others. And that is why every Yid is called a Ben Avraham, Yitzchak, v'Yaakov. This Shvatim do not have a shaykhis to each and every Yid. Every Yid has a shaykhis to his particular shevet. However, Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, every single Yid has a shaykhis to them. And every Yid is called Ben Avraham, Yitzchak, v'Yaakov. And that is why Ava, Yira, and Tiferes, which each and every Yid possesses, this is an inheritance from the others. Ava from Avraham, Yira from Yitzchak. Yitzchak's avodah was a pachad Yitzchak, fear, and Tiferes, which is a combination of both. This is what Yaakov stood for. And all of these midas, each and every Yid possesses within himself, and it comes as an inheritance from the others. So now the Rebbe is bringing out, what's the pshat that Yitzchak lived 180 years? We find Yitzchak lived 180. We find in Gemara, Tanoim, Gemara tells us about a Tane, Repreda, that he did an awful amount of tzedakah in Gemilas Chesed, and he was rewarded that he lived very, very long, longer than 180. What the Rebbe mentioned, Yishai, the father of David. Yishai, the father of David, he was one of the few people that the only reason that he passed away was, the Gemara tells us, is because of Etyeh Shel Nachash, because of the sin of the snake. Otherwise he would have lived. Would have lived forever because he had no sin. So Yishai lived very long. What's the pshat we find by people that they live very long? Or we find regarding Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. Famous quotation of Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, he said, Harei ani kiven shivim shana. He was at the age of 18, he was young, and that's when he was appointed a Nasi. And what did he say? Harei ani kiven shivim shana. I am as if I would be 70 years. So the simple meaning is that he had made a nest, that he had a white beard, so that everybody should respect him. But Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah would not talk stam in the Weltach, he would not go say things, say words to praise himself that he is already like he's 70 years old. So what's the pshat? Pshat is that Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah brought out that he was thankful to the Eibishter that in his young age of 18 he has accomplished what it takes 70 years to accomplish. That's the Tait Sharayani Kiben Shim Shana. At that time, not just the fact that the Eibishter gave him in Gashmi is a white beard. Harayani Kiven Shivim Shana means that he reached to this level, Kiven Shivim Shana, that this is already what he has achieved. When we're talking about the Inyan of Yitzchak, lived 180 years, and it's an Inyan of Tmimos, Pshat is each and every Yid is given koiches that he can accomplish what it takes 180 years to accomplish. Everyone in his lifespan, whatever the Rebbe gives, number of years the Rebbe gives to a person to live, ad meya ve'eschim, is a type a person is given koiches that he can accomplish this inyan what it takes 180 years to accomplish. And this is the hero what we have from this Sedra. Here the Rebbe went into another inyan, and he brought out how any davar shebikdusha, anything that has to do with kedusha, davar shebikdusha lo yizaza mem kaima, does not move from its place. Remember, it remains eternal. When something in kedusha, it's not the type it comes and goes. If it was once here, it's here to stay. The Rebbe brought out Same thing, all the Rabbeim, beginning from the Baal Shem Tov, the Maggid, the Alter Rebbe, the Mitteler Rebbe, and again mentioned about the Mitteler Rebbe who has a specific shaykhs to this month because of Tes and Yud Kislev, the Rebbe Tzemach Tzedek, the Rebbe Marash, the Rebbe Rashab, and the Siderenu. All of them, their inyanim, what they have accomplished in their being, their Metzias, all of this remains eternal, being that it's a Dovish B'Kedusha, and a Dovish B'Kedusha is Loizaza Mem Kaima. Rabbi says, really, all the Rabbeim have a shaykhs to Chodesh Kislev, even though it's not seen obvious. Some of the Rabbeim, it's very obvious the shaykhs to Chodesh Kislev. Tes Kislev, we know the Maggid has a shaykhs to Kislev. The Maggid's Yortzeit is in the month of Kislev. But in Mittel Rebbe we just spoke about, it's a very famous expression. The Rebbe got married on Yudalit Kislev, 14 days in Kislev. It was once in a Farbrengen when the Rebbe celebrated 25 years from the Chasana, Tafshin Yudalit. There the Rebbe expressed himself with a very, it's a line that's repeated very often. The Rebbe said that his shaykhs to Chassidim is because of the day of Yudalit Kislev. In other words, the day of Yud. What it means? Very simple. In other words, the whole Inyan, the Rebbe being Rebbe, is because of Yudalit Kislev. They said it very clearly, and that's why it's repeated. Chassidim always repeat it, and that's why Chassidim have a very strong feeling to celebrate this day, because this is really the day that, as the Rebbe put it in his own words, this is the day that brings the shaykhs, the relationship between him and Chassidim. And the Rebbe concluded, let it be, Hikitza V'Hanan U'Sheich Ne'yafa, which this will be with the coming of Mashiach. Then the coming of Mashiach will also lead to Tchiyas HaMeisim. And then everyone will arise, Hikitza V'Hanan U'Sheich Ne'yafa, with all the Rabbeim amongst them as well. Asked again, the nigun of Pada B'Shalom, which is a nigun that has a shaykhs, a specific shaykhs to the month of Kislev, to the celebrations of Tes Kislev, Yutes Kislev. This nigun was already sung, and here it was. So we're already into all of these inyanim. Here they sang the nigun of Pada B'Shalom again. Then the Rebbe went on into the second Sikha. The second Sikha had a shaykhs to the Siyam Sefer Torah, which took place on Thursday evening. Sefer Torah that was written by Neshei B'Nois Chabad, and it was written in memory with schus of the Rebbetzin Nishmas Eiden. In fact, Thursday evening, right after Ma'ariv Thursday, the Rebbe went back to his house on President Street, and Thursday evening after Ma'ariv, the Rebbe also spoke a Sikha. The entire Sikha was related to the importance of the Jewish woman. The Rebbe began that Rosh Chodesh Bechlal is a yontif that has a shaykhs to women. And the Rebbe brought the Pirkei to Rabbi Eliezer, it's a medrash that tells us that when the Yidden sinned with the Chet HaEgel, and everybody participated in the Egel, it was the women that they refrained from participating in the Egel, and they controlled themselves and had no shaykhs to the Egel. And that is when the Rebbe said that he will reward them with a special yontif, dafke to women, and that is Rosh Chodesh. And that is why it's customary that women refrain from doing certain malachas, from sewing on Rosh Chodesh, because this is their yontif. The Rebbe brought out also, and referred to the same inyan again today, how the whole inyan of the brachas, we find in this week's Seder, how Yaakov got the brachas of V'yitan Lecha. Thanks to whom was Yaakov able to get it? It's all thanks to Rivka. In other words, Rivka was the one that guided him and step by step told him everything what to do, so that he should, and this led to it that Yaakov received the brachas. In other words, if not for Rivka, Yaakov would have never received the brachas. So we brought out the same we find by the other imahis. We find the Kadosh Baruch Hu telling Avraham Avinu, "Koila shertoima relecha Sarah, shema bekoila." Whatever Sarah says, you should listen. As well as by Yaakov, before Yaakov ran away from the house of Lavan, whom did he call to consult with? Yaakov called Vayikra LaRachel LaLeah to consult with them what to do. It's basically the Nekudas which the Rebbe brought out when he was talking Thursday night. It was the Rebbe was bringing out the Maila of Noshim B'Yisrael, because here we're dealing on an incident where it is through the Hishtadlus, through the effort of women, that a Sefer Torah was written l'schus the Rebbetzin. In fact, the Rebbe mentioned
mentioned Thursday, is also extremely, his expression, it's appreciated also the fact that Ze Keli Ve'anvehu, pasuk which we say every morning in Oz Yoshia, Ze Keli Ve'anvehu, this is my God and I will glorify him. So Chazal say on this pasuk that whenever we fulfill a mitzvah, Hisnoel lefonov b'mitzvahs. When you do a mitzvah, you have to make sure that the mitzvah is done in the nicest way. In other words, if we're dealing with an inyan of mitzvah, make sure add beauty to the mitzvah in any way possible. The Rebbe said he's appreciating the fact that everything around the Sefer Torah, in other words, the mentala, which is the jacket which comes on the Sefer Torah, the crown of the Sefer Torah, all of this was done in the pattern of Ze Keli V'anveyu. All of this was done in a way that effort was put in, that it should be done in the most nicest and beautiful way possible. And today also the Rebbe is speaking in continuation to the Siyum Sefer Torah which has taken place. And especially that we have already read in the Sefer Torah. Read in the Sefer Torah by saying a bracha before every aliyah and a bracha after every aliyah. And it was read in shul where there's an Aron Kodesh. An Aron Kodesh contains within it more Sifrei Torah. And that is why there's a minig Yisrael that when a Sefer Torah is completed, a tremendous simcha is made. And it's similar to the simcha of Simchas Torah. Just like Simchas Torah we make a simcha. When we finish the reading of the Torah, when we finish the learning of the Torah for the entire year, the same way when a Torah that has been written and has been completed, it's also an inyan of simcha. Even though when we begin writing a Sefer Torah, it's also an inyan of celebration and it's also an inyan of simcha, but again, we cannot compare it to the completion of the Sefer Torah. When we complete it, that is when it becomes a fartik gezach, it becomes something complete, it becomes something eternal, and we can read from it and we can use it. And here the Rebbe brings out that every Sefer Torah really relates back to the first Sefer Torah which was placed in the Azorah of the Mishkan, in the Azorah of the Beis HaMikdash, and prior to that in the Mishkan. Why? Because the way we write a Sefer Torah is the Sefer Torah is written and then it is proofread from a previous Sefer Torah, and this previous Sefer Torah was proofread from a previous Sefer Torah prior to that. So this makes a shaykhis from all the Sefer Torahs, that all the Sefer Torahs have a shaykhis one to the other, way back to the very first Sefer Torah. A Sefer Torah has a special shaykhis to this week's Sedra. Because in this week's Sedra, we talk about V'yitan Lacha. V'yitan Lacha Metal HaShamayim u'Mishmanei Haaretz. And as far as Metal HaShamayim, what's the title Metal HaShamayim? There's a drash in Chazal that Metal HaShamayim applies to Chamishim Shetorah. Five Chumashim, this is the, in other words, Chazal interpret that when Yitzchak received the bracha from Yaakov, there's the bracha in Gashmias, that he will, Yaakov received the bracha from Yitzchak. There's the bracha in its pshut, in its pshat sense, in Gashmias, Metal HaShamayim u'Mishmanei Haaretz, and then there's also interpretations from Chazal, in addition to the simple meaning of the words. And one of the interpretations is that what does it mean, Metal HaShamayim, the dew from heaven? It refers to Chamisha Chumshei Torah, the 5 Chamashim which come from heaven. So Mamela, this is how this week's Sefer Torah has a shaykhis. This week's Sefer Torah has a shaykhis to the Sedra of the week. Especially when we're talking about a Sefer Torah which was written in participation from many people from Klal Yisrael, and when people contribute towards the Sefer Torah, then it's like they also give tzedakah for the Sefer Torah, so it's also involving already an inyan mitzvah of tzedakah, and everything regarding the Sefer Torah, the mentala, the tashmishik tisha, that's the little the jacket that's put on the Sefer Torah, and everything else that's needed for the Sefer Torah. All of this came through the contribution of women, and it's extremely. The Rebbe concluded that the maila of women is
We find it in the whole Chazarah. What do we read? The name of the Chazarah is Ve'ela Toldos Yitzchak. Chazarah is supposed to tell us about Yitzchak. So really about Yitzchak, the Chazarah does not tell us too much. About Yitzchak we learned already in Parshas Vayera, Parshas Chazarah. In Parshas Toldos we learn very little about Yitzchak. But whom does the Chazarah really talk about? About Rivka. And here again the Rebbe brought out the fact that, which you mentioned Thursday night, that the brachas which Yaakov received, it's all thanks to Rivka that she guided him, that he was able to receive all of these brachas. And we also find later in the Chazarah that what led to the marriage of Yaakov, when Yaakov was told that he should go to Padan Aram, it was also based on the advice of Rivka. And Rivka expressed herself, Katzti v'chayim ibnois ches, that she does not want that Yaakov should marry any of the girls, any of the women where they were. But what she did was similar to what Avram did by sending a Lazar as a shliach to find the shidduch for Yitzchak. And what she did was, she was the one that intervened by Yitzchak to agree to the fact that Yaakov should go away to Padan Aram and his shidduch should be there. Here the Rebbe brings out, this is the mailam, the advantage of the woman, that even as in Yonam of Afatas HaMayonis, there are certain times, certain areas, as far as reaching where we can reach out, where men cannot reach out, and it's dafke, the mailah of Isha B'Yisrael, that she can accomplish. And that is why a woman is called the Akeres Habayis. She's the head of the household. The Rebbe many times mentions that the title of Akeres Habayis, Akeres is Meloshen Ikar. She's the main, the base of the house. And she can have, at times can have a very strong effect, and more of an effect than men, as far as in Yonim of spreading Yiddishkeit and spreading Chassidus. And the Rebbe concluded that the merit that all of this was done in a way of Zrizos, the Sefer Torah was prepared in a very fast way, this should lead to it that the Geula should also come keheref ayin, instantly. The coming of Mashiach should also be in an instant way, until we will be Zeicher, that we will have access to the Sefer Torah. Which Sefer Torah? The Sefer Torah which is in the Chazarah of the Beis HaMikdash, and we will be able to read from that Sefer Torah in the Beis HaMikdash. Then the Rebbe continued. So this week was the conclusion of the convention of the Shluchim, and in Yonim that had a shaykhs to the convention of the Shluchim were printed this week. And Bechlal, we know there's a quotation from the Tzemach Tzedek that when something is put into print, that is when it becomes eternal. And in Parshas Toldos we also have an indication to the concept of Shlichus, and that is how Yaakov was sent to Padan Aram. He was sent by Yitzchak and Rivka, as we discussed earlier. It was based on the suggestion of Yitzchak, on the suggestion of Rivka, that they agreed, that Yitzchak agrees to send Yaakov to Padan Aram. Which this was a tremendous, on one hand it was a tremendous yerida for Yaakov to leave Yitzchak, to leave his environment, and go where? And go to Lavan. So it was an inyan of a yerida g'dayla. And this is the whole inyan of Shlichus. The Rebbe stressed last week at length that really the whole inyan of Shlichus is shaykhs to every single Yid. Every Yid is a Shliach. How is every Yid a Shliach? Because every Yid has his neshama Shlichus, his neshama mission. By the neshama coming down into this world, the neshama comes down here to fulfill a Shlichus. As we say, neshama shenasata bi tahoirahi, the neshama which you have given unto me. That's how we recite every morning in davening. And what's the pshat nosata? You have given, there's an expression in Chazal, kol hanoisein ba'ayin yofen noisein. Everyone that gives with a good eye. The Rebbe gave with a good eye. Gave us the neshama, tahoirahi. And as it's explained in Chassidus at length, when we're talking in Al-Kai Neshama, when we say tahoirahi, ataverosa, atzarta, atanafachta, this refers to the neshama. The neshama is going through the various levels. First, the neshama stands at a level tahoirahi. This relates how the neshama is natzilas. And then the neshama goes down, yerida ache yerida. But the neshama, prior to its coming down, is called an oimed. The neshama stands on one place. After the neshama comes down into this world, the neshama gains the title of being called a mehalech, to be able to go. Going, when do we apply the expression of a mehalech? That is when one can go from level to level, going unlimited way, mechayil al choyil. When is this accomplished? This is accomplished through the neshama coming down onto this world. In other words, what the Rebbe is bringing out, on one side, it's a tremendous yerida for the neshama. It's a letdown. The neshama is going mi'igra rama lebeira mikta, from a very high mountain into a very deep ditch. However, when the neshama is successful and the neshama fulfills its shlichus, its mission, why it came down into this world, then this investment of the neshama coming down here turns out to be a very fruitful one, a very extremely profiting, and the neshama can reach to much higher levels than the neshama was prior to its coming down. But again, this is the shlichus that each and every yid has. Every yid is a shlich from the Eibishter. And the mission, the goal of every shlichus is La'asais lo yizbarech dira betachtonim, to make this world a dwelling place, a dira, a residence for the Eibishter. And that is why every neshama comes down into this world. The Rebbe concluded, now is the time, it's the proper time for those that have submitted mashke. Mashke goes for various causes, various Farbrengens, various Chanukah Sabayis, or it's a founding of a new Chabad house, or it's type of Farbrengens in other cities, and here as well as in other cities, in other parts of the world. So all those that have submitted mashke should come up and get their mashke and announce what the mashke is for. And then the Rebbe again used the expression that we are in the Doyer HaGeula. We are in the generation that we will have the Geula in our generation. Even though, on one hand, we are not up to this madrege yet, we use the expression, it is kinanos al gabe ha'anok. It's a Hebrew expression which means like a midget who's on the shoulders of a giant. We are take ananas, we are take midgets. However, when we are al gabe ha'anok, when we are on the shoulders of the giant, this makes us worthy, that we will be worthy to be the Doyer HaGeula, that Mashiach will come in our generation. The Rebbe concluded again, reminding, mentioned earlier, which was spoken during the week, that to utilize the month of Kislev for the learning of Chassidus, to make shiurim, to increase, be meisef, it's an appropriate month, it's Chassidish month, and we should publicize this. And after Shabbos we can reach out. We have access to reach out to people whom we cannot contact during Shabbos, places that we cannot contact during Shabbos, to reach out to those places as well. And see to it that the month of Kislev is utilized properly and primarily to be meisef, to increase in the learning of Chassidus during this month.